It is Friday, December 21st. Let's talk PlayStation. So yes, there was a lot of news stories for PlayStation, a lot going on, so we have to jump into our first news story really quick with the Kingdom Hearts 3 Limited Edition PS4 Pro Bundle that Sony announced earlier in the week, and this console does look very nice, I'm not going to lie. If you're into Kingdom Hearts, you probably really enjoy this bundle, and it is kind of already more or less sold out in terms of pre-orders. So this bundle is supposed to go day and date launch with the game, January 29th, 2019. Now, I don't know how many retailers in Europe there are that will have this machine, but at least in North America, it's limited to just GameStop and EB Games, US, GameStop, Canada, EB Games. And so as far as I'm seeing in terms of storefronts and pre-orders, they're pretty much all gone. So if you are interested in this console and you find a retailer, local or online, that does still have some, or if it becomes available again, I suggest you probably snatch it up really quick because these consoles are probably highly sought after. Now, going into our next news story, if you live in Europe, you may have noticed that your PlayStation Store now allows you to change your store's region, which is kind of a big deal. We've never seen anything like this before, and so it was really exciting to see this earlier in the week, that you could now view a different storefront, a different language, and see the different games and prices. And while generally the games and prices are the same, I'm sure there's maybe a few outliers or exceptions, but essentially still the same, so there's not many great benefits to this, but it's still very handy and useful for many people that move throughout the country. They, change countries or move or whatever. That's just a thing that people do. Now, the unfortunate thing is you can't actually purchase games this way. So this led a lot of people to believe that maybe Sony did this prematurely or the feature wasn't ready just yet. And this is actually probably in relation to a new law put in place by the European Commission that basically says you can't discriminate or geofence certain digital goods in storefronts. So this is probably Sony's reaction to this, I'm guessing. I'm not entirely in tune with the scenario, so anybody from Europe can absolutely inform me more in on this, but this is my understanding of it at least. And so at the very least, it looks like Sony's cooperating because later in the week, essentially this was only available on the PS4 storefront. Then later in the week, it was available on the PlayStation website. So now you can see that there is a bit of a gradual rollout. So essentially, maybe in the next week or so, Sony will get this ready in terms of actually buying the goods and allowing proper changing of the storefront to the point where you can do something with the games on there. At the very least, again, the benefit isn't totally obvious to many people, but for some, it is a very nice thing that Sony's finally cooperating with. Now, moving on to Final Fantasy VII Remake, we actually have an update, and the update is that there is an update later in 2019, presumably. So, the game's producer, Yoshinori Kitase, was talking to Famitsu, and he basically said, "Development on Final Fantasy VII Remake is progressing smoothly. I would like to try and meet the expectations of fans." Now, the game's director, Tetsuya Nomura, said, "Various presentations to be released." Not the most exciting details, however, the way that they're wording it kind of suggests that they're probably going to go for some sort of re-reveal in 2019, which the game kind of needs because it probably looks a lot different, given the rumors surrounding the initial development of the game, which is that CyberConnect 2 messed up in some way, or it wasn't looking good, or it wasn't going in the right direction, then changing hands in terms of development, and basically being rebooted and losing 2 years of development cycle of whatever they had built already, whether that was assets or the engine or what have you, right? Whatever was going on, essentially those 2 years were scrapped and kind of redone. So I'm guessing 2019 is probably going to see some sort of reintroduction of what it looks like today, and that's, I think, more exciting than anything because I'd like to see this game again in some capacity, and it's also in a very weird spot, right? Because there's no way the game's getting released in 2019. There's no way it's getting released in 2020, possibly. In 2020, we are expecting next-generation consoles, so I think it's very fair to say that this game, it's not going to ignore PS4 and Xbox One, but I think certainly it's probably going to be a cross-generation title. And I think the real question is, will it be day-and-date cross-generation? Because that's kind of the area where this game's now falling in. So I'll see you whenever they have another update. Now check it out. Media Molecule finally delivered on the Dreams beta, because if you remember, like a month or a month and a half ago, Media Molecule promised that there's still going to be a beta for 2018, and I was kind of like, what do you mean, dude? There's like not that much left of 2018. But sure enough, they announced earlier in the week that the beta would go live, I think on the 19th or the 20th, if I'm not mistaken, but anyway, it's live now. Well, it's a closed beta, mind you, so this is actually only available for people that were signed up to the Media Molecule newsletter, and from what I'm hearing, not many people got in, even if they were signed up to the newsletter. It's got an NDA attached to it, non-disclosure agreement, so not many people are allowed to talk about it. Well, nobody's allowed to talk about it, but I'm sure maybe in a few days somebody will blurt something out or write anonymously or post footage, whatever. There's a good chance that it'll happen. Even if it doesn't, there'll be a more semi-public open beta where you can sign up. That'll start in January 4th where you can sign up, and then January 8th, I think invites will actually start to go out, and so that's good. And MediaMalk did clarify that whatever you make in the beta currently will in fact go over to the final game, which is good because anything you did in the Little Big Planet betas historically did not carry over to the final game. So it's great that we'll finally see people play with Dreams, because this is the thing about Dreams. It's a game about creativity. The stuff that Media Molecule has shown us is great, but this game will really shine when you give it to the hands of other people. So I think this is where we'll really start to see the potential of this game, and I'm quite confident that people will make incredible things with this game. And another quick update on the Medieval Remaster, which is that they are doubling down on really making sure this game is truly authentic to the original. The original composers have now confirmed that they are on board with the game and they are doing the score for it, which is sweet, because that's kind of the thing we talked about before, which is that I love whenever a remake or a remaster is done and they are super true to the source material and try to stay as close as possible and even try to find original talent that worked on the game. And I guess it's very notable because of something like Medieval, which is, 20 years old at this point. I mean, it's a very old game, so there are many situations and circumstances where you don't get the original talent, whether that's voice or composing, but I'm loving the fact that we are seeing so many of these proper remakes that are being done in the very best and most graceful way possible. I mean, you sometimes in the games industry expect the very worst, but these are the few moments where you're really seeing a lot of great stuff going on. All right, now let's go into this rabbit hole of a news story, and I'll try not to spend too much time on this because it's kind of ridiculous. But so somebody on Twitter earlier in the week noticed that the holiday theme that Sony sent out to people via email has a very interesting sort of little possible tease in it. And it's just a typical holiday theme that Sony sends out. I think they do this every year. They do it via email. Some people get it, some people don't. You just sign up for their, promos or whatnot, their newsletter. You sometimes get these free goods that they send out to people, right? And it's just a free little holiday theme. So this guy on Twitter noticed that the S in... So there's two parts of this theme. One that says holidays, one that says PlayStation. You notice the S in holidays is different from the S in PlayStation. In fact, the S in PlayStation looks very much so like a 5. Which, initially, right off the bat, oh my god, this is a PlayStation 5 teaser or whatever. So let's just dissect this real quick. So one, yes, it does look like a 5. It definitely looks like a 5. It's a different S for sure. Some people are like, oh, it's just a capitalized S. Well, all the letters in PlayStation are capitalized. It's not that. It clearly, deliberately looks different. So the rebuttal basically is that, well, this could very much be a nod to the PlayStation 4's 5th anniversary. It doesn't necessarily have to be a PS5 tease. But here's the thing, and I am not saying it's a PlayStation 5 tease. I don't know. I don't really know what to think of it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think it's that very deliberate. I mean, I guess it is deliberate because it very much so does look like a 5. My thing is, and this is why some people shouldn't totally write this off right off the bat, is that Sony, the legal team of Sony, is they're very picky with the spelling of the word PlayStation. Sony's very particular about this. You want to know why they're particular about this? Because when they launched the PlayStation 3, the legal way to say PlayStation 3 was all capital letters. Well, not to say it, but if you were writing it. And this is something that the legal team's very picky about. So in terms of email or a blog post or reviewing their games or whatever, they want you to fully capitalize PlayStation 3. This is how they legally did that system. And then during the Slim redesign, it went back to PlayStation capital P, capital S. And so, they do care about those things, right? So when you'd see a theme like this, and you'd see it done in a different kind of way, and granted this is all capitalized too, so it kind of already burns down my initial theory. All I'm saying is that they actually do care about those things. So I feel like this S was deliberately changed to a 5. But is this a PS5? Not. I'm not going to sit here and talk more. I'm not going to go on longer about this news story, more or less. I think it's just another small, finite detail that people freak out about too much. And let's just wait until Sony actually tells us something about it, which will be in 2019. All right, now moving on. It has come to light that developer Housemarque is working on a AAA unannounced game alongside their current announced project, Storm Divers, which is kind of a battle royale, free-to-play style game that's going to be released for PC at some point in 2019. We don't know the extent of how big that game is, but we kind of know that it's maybe not AAA, and that they are also working on an actual AAA big budget game that'll be the most ambitious title this developer has ever worked on. Now, just a quick FYI, if you don't know why this relates to PlayStation, developer Housemarque has a long history with PlayStation. They have released many arcade shooters for PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, like Super Stardust, Resogun, Dead Nation, recent releases like Nex Machina, Matterfall, and they're all good games. This developer releases many fantastic games. Super Stardust and Resogun are some of the best twin-stick shooters that you could really play, and they're exclusive games to PlayStation. But this developer does also do PC stuff, so it's not necessarily a situation where they may be working with Sony, but it is interesting to note because, well, this could very well be another second-party exclusive to PlayStation, assuming that Sony does still have that good relationship with Housemarque. And, you know, Housemarque traditionally has made so many smaller games, so do they have the budget to release some kind of game like that? Of course not. They always have somebody publishing it behind the scenes. So who's publishing this big AAA game that they're working on? Because they are most notably known for smaller scale games, maybe it's Sony. Now, of course, they could go with a third party and do multi-platform, and I think that's really in Housemarque's best interest. If they're going to be doing a very big budget game like this, they probably want to see it do very well. And I believe in Housemarque. I think they're a very great developer. They could do many great things, I think, if they really tried to. But I think Sony is very much so possibly a good candidate for them, you know, publishing this game, which would almost certainly secure another PlayStation exclusive. So it'll be great to see what they're working on, because last year they released a blog post essentially saying arcade is dead because all the twin-stick arcadey type games that they've been releasing just have not been performing commercially all that well, despite the fact that they've been received critically well. And that was kind of a really depressing thing when we talked about that last year. But I believe in them. These are good guys. You know, they've released really quality games, so I can't wait to see what they do with a game that's, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 times bigger than what they normally do. All right, let's try and time me here. We got an Uncharted movie news story, and once again, not very good of an update. But the director has now left, so now it doesn't have a director anymore. Tom Holland is still slated to play Drake. As far as I know, the script is still the same, but this director has now left, and Sean Levy is now going to be directing something called Free Guy, which is actually another video game-inspired movie about somebody who finds out they're an NPC in a game, and they're trying to, like, stop the developers from destroying the game or whatever. I don't know. But now the Uncharted movie is once again in limbo, which is unfortunate, although maybe not, because do we really need this movie at this point? Okay, the next one is about a new job listing at Sony Interactive Entertainment, and it's very interesting because it is for a staff software engineer, cloud backend, and it actually lists, as part of Sony Interactive Entertainment, the cloud gaming engineering and infrastructure team is leading the cloud gaming revolution and putting console-quality video games on any device. So this started a few conversations regarding what Sony's doing when it comes to cloud gaming, because there's also the relation to what Microsoft's doing with Project xCloud, which is putting Xbox One games on any device, and Microsoft's been very forward about that. They announced that back in October about basically trying to, you know, unify their games on many different devices. They even talked about that way back at E3, and presumably they're also going to be making this a big deal in their next generation of Xbox consoles, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you know, this kind of came out, and a lot of people were like, oh, so that's Sony's going to be doing the same thing. What some people seem to forget is that Sony basically did this actually with PlayStation Now not that long ago. PlayStation Now is actually widely available. Well, not widely, but it was on PlayStation 3, it was on PlayStation Vita, it was on PC, and it still is on PC, and it was on TVs as well. I believe just Sony Bravia models, maybe a few Samsung models slipped in there as well, but Sony was trying to do this. It wasn't available on phones, but they were essentially putting PlayStation Now in many various places up until they actually ceased support for most of those platforms, and it's now strictly PlayStation 4 and PC. And you have to keep in mind that when they do something like that, that's because the cost of operation for those platforms was far outweighing any sort of profit or subscriber numbers or user activity from those platforms. So basically it just wasn't even remotely worth it. You know, PS3 and Vita you could certainly see, but TV certainly didn't catch on, so that's not entirely surprising. Their commitment to PlayStation Now is obvious, with 700 plus games, constantly advertising it, constantly running deals, and that's despite the fact that nobody uses it. And sure, there was that recent revelation that PlayStation Now is the leader in revenue in terms of subscription and streaming services, but you know, again, grading on a curve, the revenue that PlayStation Now presumably makes for that given quarter it's not a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money, but if you look at that in relation to anything else, more or less in terms of what Sony's doing with PlayStation hardware or software, it's not a lot of money. So we know that not many people are using PlayStation Now or streaming, but the reason why Sony continues to support it and continues to double down on it is because they know that's where they're assuming the future is going to go and where most consumers are going to go at some point in time, which is why they keep doing it, and they want that head start. Because Microsoft is still kind of in the early stages. Well, maybe not early, but they're certainly not to the point where PlayStation Now is when we're talking about Project xCloud. Microsoft feels that this is also the direction where the industry is going, and that's why they're working on xCloud and talking about putting Xbox One games everywhere. So this job listing isn't really all that surprising. It just tells us that they're probably going to try more devices again in the future. So possibly TVs again. Certainly they'll more than likely go for phones. It's still up in the air in terms of how well that'll end up doing. I don't see it being very desirable 2-3 years from now, but maybe 4 or 5 years from now, and that's what both Sony and Microsoft are banking on. Now, speaking of Microsoft, we'll talk about them real quick, because I know it's Let's Talk PlayStation, but I always find it somewhat odd when we completely ignore what they're doing, especially when it's a very big rumor regarding next generation, and both these manufacturers are going with the same supplier, so it's it's kind of weird to not talk about it, and it's always exciting to talk about next generation hardware, and these rumors very much so line up with what we've heard so far in terms of the Xbox Scarlett consoles, which is Microsoft's family of consoles that they'll be doing moving forward, and we can talk about that in terms of what Sony's doing. So the recent rumor that was released this past week in regards to Xbox is that they are in fact going with 2 consoles, one that's more of a lower trim, one a higher trim. The higher trim is codenamed Anaconda right now, the lower trim Lockhart, and it's essentially what we're going to be seeing right now. A future next-gen Xbox One is kind of a not lower powered, but certainly an entry model, and then one that's more souped up, and apparently this will be day and date releases more or less. So Microsoft will be starting with 2 SKUs right off the bat, and they're going with AMD as far as we know, and AMD has been pretty open about this as well. I think there's no doubt in our minds that AMD is going to be powering both of these machines. Both Xboxes will be backwards compatible, and Microsoft's already got that down more or less pat because they've got the software emulation in place with the current Xbox One hardware. It's x86, so presumably, of course, next-gen Xbox will play Xbox One games. So that'll be very enticing for them in terms of being an Xbox gamer. You can buy the next-generation hardware and have the confidence to now know that you can go back 3 generations, which is pretty awesome. Now, of course, there's still compatibility issues in terms of what Microsoft allows in terms of backwards compatibility. We've talked about that in my previous backwards compatibility videos, which is that they don't just let anybody use the emulator. It is a sort of gradual release of supported games, but at the very least, that's still very enticing. In terms of what we're doing right now with Sony, we do have, well, the current rumors with Sony suggest that they are going with 1 SKU. We haven't really seen any rumors whatsoever, not even really crazy rumors suggesting that there's 2 SKUs. As far as we know, 1 PlayStation 5 SKU, a souped up box, AMD powering it, possibly the controller having some sort of touchscreen on it, PlayStation VR technology baked into the box. That would be the breakout box for it. So that's a different strategy for sure. Sony may be just jumping right off the gun with a somewhat premium machine because that rumor was $500. I still think that that's a little crazy, not to say that it won't be worth $500, but just that Sony learned their lesson not releasing a system that much. PS4 came out at $400. That was very successful. They knew PS3 was kind of a bad idea with that high price tag, but then again, that's over 10 years ago now, so maybe just in terms of inflation, most consumers are now okay with spending $500. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I still think it would be in Sony's best interest to release this at a very low price point and just try to get a good ratio in terms of price to performance. But I will be honest, there is one thing that really excites me, and that's Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you could win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate Anthony Motto. You have won this week's PSN code. I'll contact you soon on Twitter to give you your $10 code over the weekend. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's super easy. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. You can follow on Twitter. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can follow on Twitch. You can retweet something. Those are all entries for you to win a $10 PSN code, and a new winner will be announced next week. We do this every week. Let me pay for your games. And so those are all the news stories I wanted to talk about with you all from this past week. And yes, the new documentary is up, the PS3 versus 360 video that I did. It's about 40 minutes long. I thank you so much for everybody being so nice and saying it was a really great video. This video took me back, nostalgia, this, that. It was very well put together. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I started to respond to a few of them, but there was a lot of comments, and I was super busy because I was out of town right after I uploaded it. Basically, I uploaded that video, and then the following day, I had a 6-hour drive, and I was gone for about 2 days. And that was fun, but now I'm back, and so I'll try and respond to more comments. But thank you all so much. Yes, there will be more of them, but they just take a long time to make, so I have no clue when you'll see the next one. I think I've got a few topics that I'm not sure which one I want to do just yet. But if you do have an idea for a documentary, by all means, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter or wherever, and give me your suggestions and ideas. I would love to see what you guys would like to see in a more detailed, longer form video. And I don't know, I guess a rough timeline would maybe be late January, February, maybe early March, depending on how swamped I get, because I have a lot of ideas for videos coming up, and this channel's only going to get better as we roll into 2019. Thank you so much. With that said, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me. I'll see you all next Friday.